Yeah, I'm Jackson. I have zero experience with carpentry.
I studied at a school for historic preservation in Boston and learned about how things were built, 250 years ago.
There's a long way to go. I'm nowhere near the top. Not that I thought I was, but there's so much more to do out there.
Welcome back to the Passion for Craft podcast. This week we are talking about how we got here, I guess, in a nutshell.
Architecturally.
As well as building material.
This isn't the birds and the bees episode.
No, it's not. But we are.
When a man loves a woman.
We're doing a quick recap in the form of a quiz, which we've done a bunch of quiz episodes in the past, and sometimes they've stayed true to a quiz episode through the end. Sometimes they've just evolved into like Richard and Jackson learning from Brent. So we'll see which route this one takes. But I think we're talking about a subject that not you and I both don't know a ton about.
No.
So
yeah, I don't know much about how we got here.
This came about because I was asking the question of, when we're talking topics, I was just saying I would love to know like a timeline of events of like what styles led to where, which got from where to where. So that's kind of how we got here.
In America, right?
In America.
We're talking about
specifically in America. I think that our podcast is very American-centric. Mm-hmm. We learned from other places. Like we've had good Ireland episodes, Quinlan Terry's episodes. So we've had some out there.
Right.
But specifically America, like how we got from B to A.
Okay,
right,
boys. Here we
go.
go.
Yeah.
Pick up your pencils. So in the vein of, learning architectural styles is a big deal. Okay. I have a lot of people sending me pictures of their houses saying, what style is it? Okay. And,
Guilty.
And they'll say it was built in 1940. What style is it? Okay. So what style is it? Built in 1940.
It's a period revival. No. Before 1940 would have been
Jackson?
period revival. It would have been post-war kind of production house.
Yeah, it's pre-production house. That's all I know.
Levittown stuff.
What style is it?
American style.
Style.
I again, this is part of my problem here. I'm leaning on you.
1940s.
I don't know styles well enough.
Okay,
I know Georgian.
Gregorian.
Whoops.
So
Georgian.
most
Victorian?
likely it's a colonial revival house. Okay. And
You were
so,
close.
so
don't
the
think
most
revival.
popular
Yeah.
house style between 1930 and 1940 was colonial revival. Okay. Followed by Tudor revival or English revival. Okay. So that was the most popular house style. And
Okay.
the colonial revival is, in fact, it's one of those answers that if I say what style is it, you can just say colonial revival, and most likely that's right.
I'd just like to say, just really quick, before you keep going, we've asked this question before. What style is the White House? There were so many wrong answers. We've talked about it before, or not wrong answers, but like the answer was yes because it was all styles. It's changed styles, but there were like 15 different answers, and I feel like we just had the same experience over again. Of like, what style is it? Colonial revival. All right. Anyway,
Okay. So
sorry for talking.
So then the next piece of that, okay, and then you guys need to understand this as we talk about the styles, right? That was built a little bit earlier than that. What style? How old is that house?
1920s.
A little bit earlier than the 30s.
That's what I was.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably 1920s.
So what makes
25
that a
house.
colonial revival?
Yes. What makes that a colonial revival?
Well, the columns, I think, right? Isn't that part of like the colonial look? Is columns on the front porch?
Okay, it's a
portico.
simple cladding, right?
Yep.
Simple
the siding?
Yep.
The kind of shutter that's
Shutters,
simple with that
yeah.
little cutout.
But what style is that leaning towards?
Beach style.
It's a combination of colonial revival and what? Arts and crafts, right?
Okay.
That's why you see those brackets in the
clovers.
eave upstairs and stuff like that. I know it's 1920s because those shutters are what was so popular in the 20s. And so it's a blend of this arts and crafts, colonial revival, mostly colonial revival, but certainly hinting at its 1920s roots with that, deep overhang and the brackets and
Huh.
Yeah. So,
More
but
to know.
so I got distracted visually there. The next question she asked me, she goes, "What style is it?" And she goes, "Is it Georgian or Federal?"
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
So
You would need to see molding details to know that.
yes, but what was my answer? What did I say to her? Why would she ask that? So,
Because those are two styles she's heard of.
so it's Colonial Revival. Okay, what's the difference between Colonial Revival, Georgian, and Federal?
Georgian is very
Georgian's
heavy.
simple.
It's got heavy molding work,
I guess
coining, right? A lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
Versus Colonial Revival, you wouldn't have coining. No.
So what is
materials used.
where I'm going with all this is it is confusing. Okay,
Okay.
because
You've proven that point.
because Colonial Revival, okay, can be Georgian and Federal. If we go, remember
It
that
can be both.
Yeah, remember that Staub house, okay, has a front, living room with a Belection molding around the fireplace. That's Colonial Revival, pre-Georgian, no mantel shelf. It's the other one.
The other stop.
I haven't
The
been
other
in that
style.
one, I don't think.
Yeah, I haven't either. I was also trying to remember which one
Wait.
is the Staub house.
This isn't the tavern one, is it?
Yes, this is the Tavern House.
Okay, I have been in that one.
Yeah. So, and then there's a marble fireplace that's very Georgian, and then there's another mantle in the other room that has a Federal fireplace. So, Colonial Revival in the 1940s will have Georgian elements, will have Federal elements. Some of those things will be, lean one way or lean the other or whatever else. But
So they're just trying to confuse us.
so
It's like, good luck.
technically, okay, when is the colonial era?
When they colonized America.
Until when?
Until 1776, when they
Well-
united the states, right?
Yeah. So we are colonies,
Yeah,
right?
until the
Until
States.
we become the United States. So really, the colonial era, when people say colonial or colonial revival, we mean sometimes even Greek revival, Federal or Georgian, and pre United States. So
So you could, like
Re-
you said, you could say colonial revival and you got it.
that's why I said
Yeah.
that's why I said that.
Because during the time of the colonies, we were copying all these other styles that were going on in England and everything else, right?
Starting in the 1880s, 1890s, when we start doing the colonial revival, when the America turns 100 years old in 1876, right? And so in the 1880s and 1890s, the colonial revival is a very popular style done in the Victorian way. And then all the way up into the 1920s, in 1926, we're 150 years old, right? And so there's this thinking back to how we used to build and what our country was, pride and everything else. And so that colonial revival style is dominant throughout the United States, okay? Later. My point is that oftentimes when I think of colonial revival, even though it concludes the Georgian era, I'm often thinking of things that are pre-Georgian, okay? Because, I mean, if Columbus discovered the United States in what year?
1492.
1492, right? So early 1500s, Jamestown, and all those early settlements, we really don't start, becoming these early developmental cities and towns and growth until the 1660s, 1680s, 1690s, right? And it's into the early 1700s. I mean, if you look at the population in America in 1690 or in 1700,
Had to be several hundred, right?
several hundred people.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, probably more than that.
Really?
There's probably 100,000 people in the colonies. In
Oh, once the
1700.
colony. Oh, 1700. Oh, okay.
Can you look that up real quick?
My bad. I had the. I was thinking we were talking like when they originally settled, not because they would have settled 1500s.
Well, yeah, the early like Jamestown and some of those early settlements were like Jamestown failed, right, and that was in the 1500s. And so Colonial Williamsburg is kind of the first 250,000 in 1700. Yeah. So so it's just starting to grow, okay? And the Georgian era, okay, in America, usually we started at around 1740, and America's growing and really going crazy by 1760, goes through a recession because of the war. in the 1770s, 1780s. Doesn't start getting going again until about 1790. Anyway, I kind of went down a rabbit hole there. But when you talk about colonial revival, you're talking about all of these different things. It can go back to that early Jamestown settlements, which if you saw that picture, most likely, what style were those early developments?
I mean, medieval. It looks like. I mean, it's like log cabins.
Yeah,
using timber frame
they're like
thatch.
Tudor, cottages and thatches, right? With thatched roofs, with timber frame, with wattle and daub, which is that infill between the beams and stuff like that. We are basically building.
Do those still exist?
I don't know where that is.
I think that's a
Replica. That's crazy.
Yeah. I don't think any of the original ones exist, but
Like that would be wild.
but the
1,000-year
those
house.
were early crude houses that, naturally, okay, the housing styles that they built, okay, we call them styles now. They would not call that a style. They would call that a hut, right?
Yeah.
They'd call that a very early
I
settlement.
mean, it was a necessity, right? Like
Absolutely.
They needed some place to live.
How to build cheap and fast and quick in order to have shelter so that we can live.
Yeah.
And so it was
Then
survival.
We, can focus
We
on
should do a
beauty.
Survivor episode where we go out. We have to build something.
Well, you think about
bushcraft.
You think
Yeah.
about some of the early crude houses in America, okay? And they happened like we're still building log cabins in Texas in the 1880s, 1870s, right? Because, you're the first person there. There is no town. What are you doing? What are you building?
Right.
And you think about these sod houses in Kansas and in the prairies where the early settlers were moving out, and there are no trees. What are you building your house out? You're building your house out of grass, right? And literally those
Puff and puff.
those houses when it would rain would leak mud, right? Their roofs were grass roots. And
That's so
so
crazy.
those early settlers that are building those early kind of crazy things are in survival mode. Now, we look back on this kind of house nostalgically and go, "Oh, isn't that charming?"
Yeah.
Right?
I like it better than the modern day stuff that we're having.
Me too.
Take us back
but-
to survival.
the that house probably there are no windows.
There's one.
Well, I don't know if you'd call that a window.
Just so audio
so-
listeners, it's a literal mud-filled walls with like 4 timber frames on each wall, and the thing that I called a window is just a wooden door that opens up.
it's a
That's half
hatch.
door.
Yeah. So it's a timber frame structure, okay, is what it is. And in between the timbers is what's called wattle and daub, which was basically mud and, anything they could stick between that would keep the weather out.
It's got sticks bundled together as like thatch, probably.
So it's a thatch type roof made of sticks. Doesn't look like it's a real thatch. And so
definitely not going to wick water away from the roof. It's going to leak like crazy.
yeah, you would think that would leak pretty bad. And so, very crude chimney made of mud and so
Some
and timber.
stones.
But what happens is, and the reason why I'm spending time on this is that we look at early things like that, and a lot of our building styles are that early colonial look. And early, and I would say that the colonial look in America starts in the late 1600s, early 1700s when they start to use like clappers, like wood boards for siding. Okay, and that's what you would see as a typical. So you have shingle houses that are shingle sided houses, and you have clapboard houses which have basically wood siding on them. And those, why were they using those materials?
They were available
Because we had miles and miles of forest, and the forests were the thing that the British Navy, which was really growing at that time, looked at America for the white pine, mass that they grew so tall. They didn't have wood like that, and so America was this amazing vast forest that they could use and build with. So, what style is that house?
Oh man,
Colonial
colonial.
revival. Or colonial.
Yeah.
No need for the revival,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's probably pre-Georgian, but you would probably call it a Georgian house for its its symmetry and the materials, the raised panel shutters. We'd have to look at the inside, but do you know when that house was built?
It's crazy how the 1715.
Yeah, so it's pre-Georgian, right? But And what you start seeing is the typical early Georgian house was a one-story house, chimney in the middle, and you had a fireplace on 4 rooms, the 4 corners. So you have a center chimney fireplace and a corner fireplace in each of the 4 rooms. This is the way it was. That was an early Georgian house.
Was this house added on to?
It must have been. Yeah, because you don't start seeing fireplaces on the outside walls and things like that until later.
Because that one fireplace is in the middle of the 4 rooms
And
on the left.
Correct.
And then the other fireplace is on the outside wall.
And this would have been added later and built later.
think that the right portion might be the original.
Oh, that's the first one. Okay.
Yeah, that looks more like it. So, when does the Georgian period start?
1715.
50. 70. I forgot what you said.
1740. When does the Georgian period end?
Whenever the federal period starts.
That's true.
When does the Georgian period end?
When King George dies, maybe? I don't know.
Nope. So the Georgian period, even in England, is named after the 3 Georges, and the third George lasts until like the 1820s or something like
so
that.
it definitely stops before then.
Yeah. So the Georgian period starts, and it begins the federal period. That should be the clue. When does the federal period start and the Georgian period end?
Oh, man.
1790.
If I knew history better.
What event happened?
The federal papers were signed. The Federalist Papers were written.
Why were the Federalist Papers written?
It's all
Good
you.
question. We have a change in government systems, I'm assuming.
Was there a change in government?
1776. 1776 happened. America's
American
birthday.
Revolution.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't think about that.
Knuckleheads.
I can't believe I didn't get that.
We would not. We would
Holy
not call.
smokes, that's embarrassing.
We would not call. We would not call name our architectural style after King George, who we just rebelled against. Right? It's called the Georgian style because the Georgian king was on the throne. Okay, and then we
That makes
go.
a lot of sense.
The Federalist Papers were signed, right? In that.
So
The
federal
Federalist,
begins.
the Federalist Papers were written to establish what kind of government, what kind of order, what kind of establishment of government would have.
How
And
is
so
America gonna work?
it was a fight between whether it was states' rights or whether it was a central government. And so, anyway,
It's a combination of the two, right?
yes,
So federalism begins 1776.
right after the Revolutionary War, which ends in
1780.
1781, I believe. And so the federal period starts, and look, these are moving. If you looked at 5 books that had, Georgian federal, Greek rival, all the different things, some would say that Georgian period starts in 1730. Some would say it starts in 1750.
It also seems kind of like
Yeah,
region
how
locked
do
a
you
little
pin
bit.
it
Right.
down?
You don't pin it down.
But
It's
also,
a moving thing.
like, think about it like a wave. Like, like the revolution happens where in Boston. Sorry, I
the
don't
first
know.
shots were fired in Concord,
Okay.
in Lexington, yeah,
So Concord, where's Concord? What state is that?
Massachusetts.
All right,
For
so
Paul Revere Road,
right, that's what I thought.
if by land, 2 if by sea.
I thought that was Boston.
It was Boston.
Oh, okay.
Concord is outside of Boston.
right.
Lexington is outside of Boston.
So sweet. So that happens, but then everything's signed, but the news took a while to spread, right? So then it would have slowly ebbed out from there, because like we're talking about how
The news of what? The revolution?
of the revolution of the overthrow.
It's
of
spread
the
pretty,
English government.
pretty fast.
I'm sure, but I guess what my point is there is like we're talking about thatch buildings in Kansas in the 1800s. You know what I mean? Like, so there's kind of this like slow moving kind of wave that you
Yes.
see with all the
Yeah,
architectural
and
styles.
that
I'm
was going to be
sure.
one of my trick questions. Is when was the last log cabin built? So you sit there and go,
You probably still could have gotten us with that.
right? Because you sit there and go, well, gosh, they were building these kind of things, and a brick building like this in Philadelphia. So the log cabins must be 1640.
Yeah.
And you're like, nope. How about 1840, right, or
been gotten with
1880?
There's companies
Because-
building them today.
Because exactly. Because of the way that we're spread across the country, we move west, and the buildings we're building in Texas in 1870 are sometimes log cabins. When they were building early forts, they would actually take wood and just stick it in the ground.
Yeah.
So they take a 2x6 and drive it into the ground, take another 2x6 next to it, drive it into the ground. They didn't expect that house was going to live a long time. It was an early.
They're just putting up a structure.
They're just putting up a structure,
Yeah.
and
Somewhere
so
to sleep for the night.
yeah, exactly. And so protect them from an Indian attack
Yeah.
or whatever they were against. So and anyway, that was going to be my trick question. Okay, so when did the federal period end?
When the Greek revival started,
Correct.
So that probably would have been.
1901.
Well, surely they had to have some sort of conversation back to
What year?
England.
1901. Final answer.
1850.
I don't know.
I'm moving
You're just
early.
laughing at me.
So, well, if the Georgian era ends in 1776, I
Wait,
don't think
okay.
it's 1901. I think you mean 1801.
Sorry, yeah.
I was laughing because
Okay.
I knew you meant 1801.
Yeah,
but you
I
said
did.
1901. No, that's not right.
I said 1850.
No.
Split the difference.
About 1820, okay, is the rough deal. Now look, there is a Greek revival building. The second bank of Philadelphia, I think, is built in like 1815 or something like that. It's a Greek revival structure. There are Greek, federal type buildings built into the 1830s. Okay, Asher Benjamin doesn't change his building style from.
That's cool.
It doesn't change his building style from federal to Greek revival until about 1827. So
it took a while to catch on.
It's a moving target, right? And so, but yes, it's generally 1780 to 1820 is the federal era. Okay.
Where you look scared, deer in the headlights.
No, I'm wondering how far whether you want kind of the full timeline or you want to dig down into issues.
I think it'd be cool to dig down into some
Yeah.
issues. I think it'd be cool to kind of hear a lot about because it looks like they've switched from wood to stone with this building.
Well, this is a commercial building. It's a bank, right? And so this is not a typical house. This is William Strickland in the early part of that era building a Greek revival, and obviously that's a what does that building look like?
Tuscan.
The Parthenon.
The Parthenon. It's the which
I've seen it
order?
strong.
It is strong.
Doric.
Doric. Okay. Because the triglyphs above in the architrave, there's no base there. That's a kind of a typical Doric
Would Tuscan
Greek revival.
be no chisels, no like lines
Flutes?
in the column?
Are you trying to say fluting?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yes, Tuscan would be so typically Tuscan. Okay, if you think about where's that style named from?
Tuscany.
Tuscany, right? And so that a very rural farm area of outside of Rome, okay? And so the Tuscan style, from what I've read, is kind of a rural adaptation of the Doric.
Got it.
Okay, so
Simpler.
realize that in the Greek and the Roman era, there was only Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. Okay, the idea of having 5 orders of architecture,
Right.
there was only 3. They like the Greeks,
Because we're
most
missing Tuscan and Victorian in that
Tuscan and composite.
composite.
So composite is a combination of
Ionic and Corinthian.
Ionic and Corinthian, correct. So and the Tuscan is a very crude, simple Doric. Okay, and so and then it gets confusing because there's Roman Doric and there's Greek Doric and there's Roman Corinthian and Greek Corinthian, and so they like if you look at the Roman Ionic versus the Greek Ionic, okay. The Greek Ionic, the volutes are just huge and massive, and the Roman Ionic are very simple and clean. And so it's really, and then you read about these pattern book authors and the things that they would look at differently. And so,
We're just
that's the
mesmerized.
Roman Ionic. And so, and those volutes are very small, whereas if you looked at the Greek Ionic, the volutes are much bigger. And it's expressed differently. So, I don't want to go down that rabbit trail because it's so
Niche.
Yeah, it's so minuscule. The little see how they did an attic base instead of a flat, and you're just like, oh my gosh. And they do 27 flutes instead of 24, and you're just like, okay. So
That's surprising. I would have thought he would have cared about that kind of stuff.
I think you do care about
I
that
do
stuff.
care, but it's like
Not for this.
Just we don't.
Not for this.
I'm just kidding.
I was going to say.
No,
I like that
people
stuff.
It's too in the weeds.
Okay. Yeah.
Even for me, I want people to get the orders right. I want them to know how to build a porch.
Yeah.
For gosh sakes, I mean, please know how to put up a column and know how to build a beam for a porch. Please, that's all I want. And to get into the things of, well, you only have that many flutes, and you never would have had that shoulder on that flute, right? It's just like
Basically, if they can get the general idea right first, let's start there, and then we can
Yeah.
start fine-tuning.
Yeah.
Got it.
And it's only academics that would get into this kind of, well, look at that kind of bracket. And if you like that stuff, Calder Loth, okay, does all these things on the ICAA. He's a brilliant architectural historian in Virginia.
Yeah.
He's the authority, and he knows all this stuff. It's beautiful,
Yeah.
right?
And he's
And
the
I like
cat's pajamas.
I like listening to his lectures, but I don't think it. It's just the minutia. Anyway, he's great. Okay. When did? Well, I'm going to go one more.
Okay.
What's the style after Federal?
Did we
Greek
say
revival.
Greek revival?
Okay. When does it start?
It's like deja vu.
I thought did we just say that?
1801?
I thought it
1815.
1820.
1815 to 1820.
1820. Well, the Federal era ends in 1820.
Right. So it has to start there.
It has to start there.
Well, you were just saying that what's his face built the first building. The Philadelphia Bank was built in 1815.
I know it's earlier, right? And so
Yeah.
That's
We
why you
just
said
got there. Yeah,
1815. When does it end?
No, we didn't get there. I guess it ends when the next period comes up. So
Victorian is next, right?
1840,
Victorian
1850.
18. You say 50, I'll say 60. We'll see
Okay,
what he
sweet.
gives
Yeah.
us.
Well, we got a range anyway.
Yeah.
Roughly 1860, 1850, right?
Yes.
So in that range, right?
Nice.
Now, why does the Victorian start and the Greek revival end?
Because industrial revolution of machinery.
Yeah, that's got to be it.
And how does that affect architects?
Because they're
Well,
like, look at this stuff we can do.
they're able to do more fine-tuned stuff at an easier, cheaper rate, right? So
Yeah.
it becomes more accessible.
Sure.
I'll take that as a yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's
It's as close as we're gonna get from
that's
him.
part of it. Okay, so the Victorian era really happens because of industrialization, and what's happening is that the country is growing more prosperous. Okay, you have the rising railroad, you have powerful machines, you have a lot of inventions, you have a lot of, like, if you look, America was always the redheaded stepchild to England, okay? And they always looked at things that the Americans were doing and just kind of like, kind of rolling their eyes. But America really grows into this prosperous nation that by, World War I, it ends up being like America is the most powerful nation industrial-wise and things like that. And it took us a long time to do it. To get there, that starts, okay, in the 1820s, 1830s, as we start inventing and doing these things. And what's happening is, as we're growing richer, as we're growing more effective in our building and everything else, it means there's a rising wealth in the country. It means that some of these inventors and some of these things are all of a sudden making a ton of money. Ithiel Town, who is an architect in the 1820s, invented a truss bridge. And this truss bridge was sold all over Europe, but it was basically a modularized bridge system that allowed you to build a bridge anywhere. And he built it out of these triangles that were basically an engineering feat that allowed people to build these bridges almost anywhere. So this
So
is like,
instead of having to like build up huge things down big chasms, you could build it off in little pieces. Is that what you're saying?
And extend it out and all of a sudden span these distances. And because of the triangle system, it would basically support on either end, and you would have this. So he made his fortune, okay, with the truss bridge system.
Cool.
So that's probably early 1820s, 1830s when he did that. And so you have this newfound wealth, and you have these guys wanting to spend that money. And so there's a rising middle class. When a country is growing like this, that you have the wealthy, you have the unwealthy. When a country is healthy, it has a strong middle class. China is in a position of trying to grow their middle class right now, and they haven't been able to raise everybody up. They're still, trying to grow up they still have a great disparity between the wealth and the poor. And so a healthy country has a strong middle class. America has a strong middle class, and you have this desire to spend money, and so our houses grow and our houses change. Yeah. Okay. The other thing that happens is what changes in building that allowed for changes in architecture.
Okay. I mean, industrialization, but that doesn't count because you just said that. Okay.
What happened to the way we build houses that caused a change?
We did the balloon framing.
Balloon framing versus timber framing, right? And so it was growing. America was growing so fast that, the idea of building a piece of handmade furniture for as a comparison to the way they would timber frame a house, to balloon framing, which would go together very fast and very cheaply, changed the way houses were built and changed the way. It means they could be built faster with less experience and less skilled labor.
So they started doing balloon framing, but they very quickly stopped it, right?
Well, we've never looked back.
From balloon framing?
We're still doing it, right?
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
Balloon framing.
I thought they added in like a stop. Like
they
a hard
did.
fire
They
stop.
did.
Okay.
That's called Western framing, or deck framing, as they might call it. But yes,
okay.
We never went back to timber framing.
Got
it. We still built with sticks. Okay, 2x4s were typically a standard 2x6, like that house in Granbury.
Yeah,
is a 2x6. Real 2 inches, real 6 inches, versus a 1.5 by 3.5, 1.5 by 5.5 today. Anyway, this changed building as well, and it made houses more accessible to the average owner. So, part of what's happening between the Greek Revival and the Victorian is newfound wealth and cheaper, faster buildings methods that allowed this change to happen. It's the reason why Victorian houses look so different from Greek Revival houses. Now, that break between pre-industrial and post-industrial is, we could spend a month talking about all the changes that happened because of that. Just think about in building. Well, think about making a molding, right? What difference would that make when you make a molding?
Oh, yeah, you're making it with this.
Yeah.
Or you're making it with a shaper.
Yeah, or you're making it with a molder, right? They'd have molders at an early thing.
What would a molder be?
What would a molder be? Uh-huh. What does that mean? What would a molder be?
You said they're making it with a shaper or they're making it with a molder. What's a molder?
So a molder is basically a powered machine that instead of just having one knife cut, it actually has 4 knives. 2 on the sides, 1 on the top, 1 on the bottom.
So it's cutting a pattern out.
It's cutting like it's molding from a square stock, a piece of a molding. Whoa. It's coming out the other end.
I use those today?
Yeah, that's what we have in.
Oh, I thought those were just shapers. I misunderstood. That's awesome.
We're in the shaper room, but in the back we have those 2 big machines or molders.
Okay, I'm tracking with it. I didn't realize that. I thought those were just shapers, but I'm tracking now.
Yeah, those are molders. So, but realize what's happening here. Okay, so if you're making a molding, okay, you have and you're the carpenter, you're the builder. Okay, you are taking this thing and cutting these exact knives, right? And so, if the customer wants a crown, okay, it's relying on the tools that you have and your ability with hollows and rounds to make whatever custom thing they want. Mm-hmm. When it gets made on a molder, the craftsman no longer has any control. Okay, all he's doing is looking on the shelf, going, "I'll take that one," right? And the level of skill it takes to take a molding and put it up has dropped by
90%.
A lot, right? Because you haven't done any work. All you've done is pull it off the shelf and you nail it up. Mm-hmm. And so
you're doing the last 10% as opposed to being able to cut the knives, set the shape.
It takes the craftsman from being the designer, from being the craftsman to being an installer. okay? And all of a sudden, this highly skilled person who could design and everything else, all he's relying on is being is installing. And so I mean, philosophically and everything else, it just changes everything. So,
Wow.
yeah, it's a huge, groundbreaking change that takes place. When is the most influential period of England in American architecture?
Man, I want to say originally. I want to say that colony stage, right?
Well, what are the kind of two eras named that have the strongest English influence?
Georgian and Victorian, yeah.
Okay, so which is more influential, the English influence in the Georgian period or the Victorian period?
Probably Victorian because we've already talked about the Georgian. I would say Georgian or Victorian. Sorry. I'd say Victorian.
Let's say Georgian just so we can get a
A
spread.
little different, yeah.
Yeah.
That's Georgian, I would say, because really in the Victorian era, I mean, it's by name only. There's not a lot of English influence. If you look at English design and things like that, it's very different from we get the arts and crafts, English arts and crafts, William Morris and a bunch of those guys. There's definitely the designers are influential, but in the Georgian period, all our pattern books are Georgian pattern books. William Payne, Beatty Langley, James Gibb, all those different, Abraham Swan, they're all English. And the very first American pattern book author is
Asher Benjamin. William Buckley.
Which one, Jackson?
Asher Benjamin.
1797 is his first book. And then you have, so that's right in the federal period, okay? And into the 1850s, you have these American pattern book authors.
Yeah.
And the English influence is lessened a great deal. And so I would argue that the Georgian period has the strongest English influence versus the Victorian period. And I mean, I'm not.
So why'd we call it Victorian then if we were already over the royalty over there?
Well, I
Wasn't
think
it going to come back to like liking the fascination of the cool, like they're very decadent and elegant, right?
I think Queen Victoria was a powerful monarch and groundbreaking in many ways. And she, as I remember, she was the mother to like 5 of the kings. Like the Russian Tsar was related to Queen Victoria. The German
Wow.
Kaiser was related to Queen Victoria.
Was that around World War II? Like,
Right before World War One. And so,
that's right, yeah.
so she has tremendous influence. And so it's called the Victorian Age, right? Because Great Britain was so powerful and influential, their navy and everything else, their imperialism, all of the things that they were doing, they were the most powerful country. And so, it's called the Victorian Age.
Okay.
But we didn't. The other weird thing about architectural styles is that they're not really called those styles during that time period. It's usually historians looking back going, that's kind of the Georgian age, or that's kind of the Federal era. That's kind of the the Greek Revival.
that's cool.
That's interesting.
I
Yeah.
didn't realize that.
And so, one that I'm wondering. Okay, here's another question: what was the last architectural style in America? Like we know it as a style.
I would say modernism. Like the big window panes, like cubism, like all the like modernism. That would be my answer.
Victorian would be the last.
What's after Victorian?
So are we both wrong?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
I mean, you could make an argument that for modernism, but I'm not going to accept that. So it goes Victorian, then it goes what?
That's what it's the next one.
Colonial?
Good try.
Colonial revival, sorry.
No. What's after Victorian? Austin, you know this, don't you?
All right, phone a friend. Austin, the producer.
Arts and crafts.
Arts and crafts.
Oh, I didn't even. I wasn't even.
What's
on the
after
radar.
arts and crafts?
Art Deco, Art Nouveau.
Commercially, what's after arts and crafts residentially.
Arts and crafts. I don't even know what that looks like.
Bungalows, craftsman style houses, prairie style houses, the green and green, and green. That's all of that. The Roby
Arts
house.
and crafts.
That's arts and crafts.
And then there's one after that.
Colonial Revival.
Colonial Revival, part of the revival movement, period revival era, English revival, Mediterranean revival.
Neoclassicism after that?
So I can see the confusion happening. Basically there is things that are happening architecturally on the commercial side, okay, that don't happen on the residential side. Art Deco, okay? I can't think of an Art Deco house, okay? And
what about it's in Spain. It's not in America. It doesn't count.
Gaudi?
Gaudi.
No. So I can't think of an Art Deco house, right? And so there's these architectural styles that tend to be heavily commercial, okay, versus residential. Cubism, right? That's an art movement, right? With Picasso and things like that, and that whole Cubism idea was a philosophical idea, okay? And so there aren't Cubist houses. There might be one experimental one or something like that. I
thought that was the Frank Lloyd Wright. I thought he had like a bunch of like Cubist houses, right? Because it's like all the rectangles playing into each other.
I mean, no. There's the Prairie movement, which he was kind of the leader of, okay, which was the Prairie School of Architecture that was, in Chicago, and there were, then he did the Usonian houses that he had, which were modularized and stuff like that, but not really Cubism. Like you might look at his house and go, it looks like a cube, but it wasn't Cubist. Right. And so my point is that there's a lot of some of the names you're throwing out are names that are commercially appropriate, but don't really. And that's why I would argue that modernism, yes, is a movement. And yes, there are modern houses, but it's a very small segment. Mm-hmm. And most production builders aren't building modernism. They're building traditional things. And so the thing goes Victorian. Okay. Heavily ornamented, arts and crafts, right?
Oh,
Simplicity, period revival, okay, where they look back to Europe and they go, oh my gosh, these houses are so beautiful. We're going to be inspired by the European designs. A bunch of architects had been to World War I, had been in Europe, seen all these houses, came back, started designing this period revival houses, French, English, Mediterranean, and then it goes into the ranch period, okay. So after that period revival, colonial revival is the ranch era. Okay, now that's early modernism. That's these low slung roofs and these long horizontal houses and things like that. I would argue that the ranch period is the last style in America that is like a style like that you drive by and go, oh, that's a ranch style house, right? If you look at a McMansion, right? That's not a style. That's a derogatory term. Yeah. But the house built in 1980, what style is it? It's not anything. Yeah. Sometimes they're bad copies of Colonial Revival, bad copies of what style is that house right there?
That's
right?
a great point.
Well, it has a Palladian window.
There's 3 Palladian windows. Right? And so it's a gable, it's windows, it's brick. Oh, it's a house, right? But it's not a style.
It's a house.
And so it's
a structure.
People live there.
It's a structure style.
And so, part of this exercise was to try to draw all this together. But I would argue that it's after 1960 that we don't even have a style in America. And that's the thing that drives me crazy and makes me go, there's so much opportunity for better building and stuff like that because we're building this.
And we don't have a cohesive style.
Look at that door. Look how it's dwarfed by everything. I mean, the scale and the proportion and everything.
The sad part about it, too, is that we're building so many of these. They're just going up everywhere. Yeah.
What would you call
we gotta start something where we can just develop a community that's all like period revival. We have to do it. Get the investors on the phone.
Yeah. Hey, as a question, if you had to name this style that we're in, where there is no style, what is it? the years of silence, or is it like the
dark
cookie
ages?
cutter
The dark
cookie
ages,
cutter
yeah.
house? Like what would you call this?
Like that house is trying to be kind
English.
of some kind of European, Frenchy, English Tudor, thing, but it's terrible.
The copycat
it is
style.
terrible. And so it's
That giant pane window over the door
it's
is
just gross.
awesome.
So
Just kidding. Just kidding.
so
It's weird looking.
I don't know. That's a good question. I think that
The silent years.
Yeah.
That's funny.
The years of silence. I don't know, because there's not. I hear what you're saying. Well, I think that actually helps me identify like what is a bad house is understanding like what style is it trying to be, or what style is it, and then kind of going like not really any of them. What does that make it good or bad, or I don't know.
Yeah. I think the point of this exercise for me, this episode for me, as you guys try to get in your brain kind of where all these things are, is this point right here, that we haven't had an architectural style in America for 60 years. That there are bad copies of traditional design elements.
That's so sad.
Right? Bad copies. And this speaks to the fact of how easy building is, okay? That, first of all, the largest home builder in the world right now is Habitat for Humanity, okay? That means that the largest, the most prolific
for
home
real?
builder, it was a few years ago. I heard D.R. Horton built 80,000 houses. I don't know if Habitat for Humanity built more than that. But yes, they are. It's a volunteer building company, okay, built by amateurs, okay, and that speaks to how easy it is to build a house. Now, obviously, I love Habitat. I think it's a great, thing that they're doing for people, and it's awesome, right? But if they are the most prolific home builder in the world, it speaks to how easy houses are to build, and it speaks to why that other house. I would presume that builder on that last house said, well, I can build that, and the homeowner got involved and said, well, I need a dormer up in the right side, and we might need a thing, and so how does that
homeowner voice?
Yeah.
how does that house get built, right? Well, we've got look at the eave detail. Well, we've got to have a timber coming out the eave. Okay. Well, I'll give you two. Right? It's just stupid.
Yeah.
Right? It's
what you're making me want to build. I always wanted to just do carpentry, but you're like making me mad, making me want to build stuff.
Anyway, it's here I am taking myself too seriously. It's tragic in my mind that we aren't building more beautifully when we have an opportunity, and we end up building things like this, because I don't think. Unless this house, it's just an ugly house. It's an ugly house.
I don't think you're taking yourself too seriously.
Yeah,
I think that's like our passion for craft is take it seriously, because look at this. Like, it's garbage.
I think it's less.
How did we get here?
It's like we have. Yeah, you're right. That was the question. I think we have this passion for craft, and it's like okay to be like, yes, this is what we're passionate about. I don't think it's a matter of like we're taking ourselves too seriously. We're not taking ourselves serious enough. I think it's like, hey, look, we can laugh at the things that we take really seriously. Like we're laughing at them. We recognize, we're self-aware enough to go, yeah, we really care about that. But also, we care about that for a reason, and that's what we're here for.
If you don't listen to us, you're going to end up with all the houses like this.
Well, it's ironic that what we're looking back at is so far away, but supposedly we've gotten so much more advanced.
Right.
Why are we looking so far back?
Oh my gosh.
So
yeah.
it's look, this has been my
crusade.
Yeah, probably because for a long time, because for years after I got out of North Bennett Street, I was like, what happened? Why is this? Why are we doing this? Yeah. When, I study these historic houses and they're so beautiful, they're so well crafted, they're so well made. And then we do this and it's like, what are we doing? And that search, when you ask why, I think I can actually point back and say, well, production building, right? Mm-hmm. That if you just want to put a gun to my head and say, give me one reason why we ended up doing this, production building. It was the, housing crisis after World War II that had guys like William Levitt in order to, and guys like him, build cheap and fast for 20 years into the 1970s. Okay. And they taught 2 generations of builders how to build cheap and fast. And no longer do we craft houses. We just kind of throw crap at them so that they can be, impressive and big and impressive, right?
Yeah.
That house, if you didn't know any better, okay, you might look at that house and go, wow, that is a crazy house. Look how awesome. You've got the timber in there, and you've got
So many
all these different
I guarantee you
all these
people
different
do that.
materials. I'm telling
I've
you.
met with so many homeowners to go to the model home because I'm going to replicate what's in the model home. And it's the same thing. Oh, I just look at this and that, And at the time, even I'm like, yeah, that's nice. Like I didn't know what I know now,
And so, and the second piece I would say is that it's an ignorant consumer. Okay, that right now we've never had such a dumb consumer when it comes to home building.
And
So
home
these
builders,
guys
we
are
love
just-
you. We think you're great.
Well, that's why these guys
Call
are
them
just
ignorant.
taking advantage of the market. It's
I'm
like-
not saying they're stupid. I'm saying that they are uninformed.
Yeah,
Right?
I was just making a joke because it sounded very condescending towards homeowners or home builders.
No, it's towards homeowners.
It sounded condescending to whoever it was toward.
Yeah. Anyway, it's just
which is part of the reason we're doing this
Yeah,
to
for sure.
educate. Like with your videos, it's like you want to educate people.
yeah.
And with those design videos, people are like realizing,
It's striking a chord.
whoa,
So,
this is how it should be.
We started this thing out. You wanted to kind of see what the big the stretch of design things were. Like, did this help?
Oh, for sure. Yes. Yeah, I have a way better mental map of the timeline.
Me too.
I think that mental map is one of the that Master Builder University I talked about doing. One of the things I want to train and help people figure out is how to put this mental map into in their head, so that when they see Victorian, they go, oh, that's that period where they did the ornamentation and that. So it's probably 1860s,
Yes,
1890s,
yeah.
right? Because I'll talk to people and they'll say, we want to build a farmhouse. And I'll say, okay, when do you want to build a farmhouse? Like what period? Is it a 1920s farmhouse? Is it a 1900s? Is it an 1860 farmhouse? Is it an 1820 farmhouse? Like, which farmhouse is it?
Just so you know, when you give people that, that's like saying, okay, you're going to go north on I-25, then you want to turn east on, you know what I mean? It's like saying 1920, saying
no,
like,
I know, and it's a
I don't know.
picture. It's a picture in my head of
Yeah.
because the 1920s farmhouse is going to be most likely more of a bungalow,
Yeah.
okay, and 1820s farmhouse is going to be more Federal or Greek Revival, right?
Yeah.
And so that means the hardware is going to be different, the windows are going to be different, the siding is going to be different,
Right.
So
And you're having these conversations, educating them?
Uh-huh.
And you have your whole library and you can show them
Yeah.
stuff, right? Do you do
Because-
that?
Oh, all the time. That's
awesome.
One of the reasons I have the library is so I can show pictures, because they'll say to me, we had a client that said, we want a colonial Mediterranean. I'm like, okay, what does that mean in your mind? And so they would show us pictures of these houses, but a colonial Mediterranean would be, what would a colonial Mediterranean be?
What does that mean to
It
you?
would be like very simple form, symmetrical probably with stucco maybe, and like
So-
a clay tile roof.
Think of the colonies that we were. America was a colony. Okay, there was colonies from Spain and colonies from England, right, in the Mediterranean and the Caribbean especially. And so Bermuda, right, ends up being these colonialized, okay, Spanish influence in Bermuda. So
Where's
they're
Bermuda?
in the Caribbean.
Okay. Oh, like the Bermuda Triangle?
Yeah.
Bermuda? Okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying a state. I was like, what city is that in?
No.
What state is
I'm
that?
saying, basically, what I'm saying is that it's a just like in those first pictures, there was like an English thatched cottage. This would have been that version of Spain's version
Of a thatched cottage.
in
Yeah.
Bermuda or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So all I'm saying is that those words don't obviously mean anything
Yeah,
until you
it's
can put a
confusing.
picture to it and say,
Yeah.
this is what that is. Is that what you wanted? No, that's not what we were thinking. We wanted more of this. You show them a picture and you go, oh, you're wanting more of that Santa Barbara, oh yeah, that's okay. Yeah. Santa Barbara, that's what, and you start showing them pictures of things from Santa Barbara and they're like, yeah, that's what I want.
Yeah.
And then
So
you
start refining into
we start
this,
refining it and starting helping them out. So it's not just farmhouse, because farmhouse to me could be anything,
Yeah.
right? What period of farmhouse, right?
Fixer upper.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. Give me the farmhouse modern.
Yeah. But that Chip and Joanna, okay?
Yeah.
The shiplap is a 1900s, 1920s, cheap house, okay, that were sheathed on the inside with those boards, the shiplap boards. So we know those
You
houses.
say that was cheap? Shiplap or sheathed?
sheathed.
Okay.
I think
Yeah.
you said cheap too. Yeah.
Were sheathed with those boards, and so we know that there's a time period, there's a time stamp on those buildings that makes me go, oh, that's from this period. That's what that is. So, anyway.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, cool. Well, thanks for this episode. This was very informative to me. I don't know. Did you feel the
Yeah, I
same
feel
way?
like we did good on the quiz too. I think we did.
I think we did. I'm
I would
worried
give you.
now.
I'd say, you guys tell me if I'm wrong. I think you guys probably had 50%.
We'll go back.
That's an F. That's
I'll
an
go
F.
back and
I'll take
watch
an
it.
F.
I'll let you know.
Yeah. Okay.
F for fun, We had fun doing it. Wouldn't have got us a good grade, but it got us a grade. Well, thanks for watching this episode of the Passion for Craft podcast. Let us know how you did on the quiz, and we'll talk to you next time.